So Gary, do you want to explain a little bit about your role on ITV Cycling and at Vuelta?
Good God, I've been doing it so long I don't think about my role. I just I just come in every day and do what I'm told. Well, I mean, everybody sort of sees what I do in front of the camera, come on and say my bit at the top and help as much as I can in the edit suite. The people doing the hard work, putting the show together, you know, structuring it and cutting the pictures, and everybody sticks their oar in. I mean, it's good. It's not a terribly hierarchical place. You know, we've got James Venner, he's in charge, but you know, everybody has their say, and you know, we set up the race, then we sit and watch it, and then David Miller sits in that chair over there, and we try and pick a little bit from the day to make some sense of and plough on with the next day.
What's your history in cycling personally?
Well, I'm as a bit of an imposter really. I had no great cycling background when I started. I was doing way back years ago before I first got this job. I'd been hired by Channel 4 to do little cultural pieces on the cities where American football games were coming from. So I was working on the American football, flying to different cities every week, you know, doing a piece on Chicago or LA or wherever it happened to be, Green Bay. And the head of sport at Channel 4 at the time said to the producers here, you want to get somebody doing the same thing that Gary Imlach's doing on the NFL on the Tour de France. And they took him a bit literally and got me. So I didn't necessarily mean him, but it was too late then. I was in. Yeah, that's what I started off doing, you know, roadside culture, annoying the purists by popping up at the start of part 2 to do 5-minute packages on whatever there was along the side of the road, and then gradually got, you know, sucked into the mainstream more of it, and, you know, loved the event and loved the sport, and, you know, but mainly doing what I do, looking at it as an outsider and you know, commentating on it.
And how did you find that transition from, say, American football to cycling? I mean, cycling has got quite a lot of mannerisms, quite a lot.
It has, but I mean, everything. I started off as a news journalist, so you know, I'd come through BBC, local radio, and ITN. So I mean, if you take a journalistic approach to something, it's quite nice to be an outsider, whatever it is, because you just look at this incredible phenomenon. And you know, and tackle it from a journalistic standpoint.
Is there a guest which stands out?
Yes, well, I mean, sadly, Chris Boardman retired on the Champs-Élysées this year. The bugger dropped us in it, so we've got to cast around and find someone to replace him, which is difficult. And I mean, Chris is the first name that springs to mind because you know our careers have sort of run parallel. I started off terrorising the poor bloke from his very first prologue in 1994. You know, he won it and suddenly found that, you know, this bloke and a camera crew were following him into the lift at the team hotel uninvited and tried to get into his room. So, I mean, he spent years glazing over at the sight of me arriving. Oh, Christ, here's Imlach again. And then we started working together and, you know, so... No, I've got a lot to thank Chris for, so I suppose he's the one who stands out.
When you're out at the tour, what does it mean to be live at a sporting spectacle?
It means, you know, being driven by fear and cortisol. I mean, you saw me before taking a few takes to memorise the opening link for the highlights show, and there's certainly no auto cue on the live show. But you don't have the luxury of stumbling and saying, "Oh, hang on, let's do that again." So somehow, you know, fear propels you through and concentrates the mind. But it means, you know, it's a great thing to be at and to be in France, but you're oddly removed as well, because if you're in the TV compound, in some respects, you might as well be 30 miles away. In some ways, we're no closer than you are watching at home, except you're probably watching on a better telly. You know, we're squinting through the sun saying, you know, what's happening at the finish there? Can we see that replay again? Trying to look at a small monitor. So, I mean, it's you're there, but you're not there. It's an odd experience.
And working live at races, do you have any moments, whether it be good or bad, that stand out?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was, and this goes back to Chris Boardman again, because it was his fault. 2 or 3 years ago, the commentators mispronounced Bauke Mollema's name as Bob Malka. Right, poor dear old Phil Liggett just mangled Bauke Mollema's name was Bob Malka. And Chris made the fatal mistake of writing it down in his notebook. So not only was he giggling about it, every time he calmed himself down, he looked down and there it was written on this bloody page in front of him. So he's giggling away. Steve Doherty, who's next door editing on this show, but who directs on the tour, was in my ear saying, all right, stage is finished, we're coming to you. Couple of minutes chat. I'm like, can we not go to a break? I'm not sure we can handle this. And Chris is giggling. I'm slapping myself to try and stop giggling. And as the countdown started, I'm like, get down behind the desk so I don't have to look at you, which he didn't. And they came back to us live. I got about 3 words out, collapsed, had to throw to a break in shame and humiliation, and compose ourselves and come back and press on. So yeah, that's the one that stands out.
Quite a moment, yeah.
Yeah.
So interviewing riders, is there anyone in particular that has stood out over the years?
I tell you what, Bianche Rees, I used to be sent off to interview Bianche Rees as punishment because he was monosyllabic. It was like being sent off to interview Nosferatu, you know, and to the point where, like I say, the director, you know, if you were having a run-in with him, he'd threaten you with sending you off to interview Bianche. But I mean, it's an art. I watch the interviews coming in every day on the feed now, and Daniel Freed running around doing an excellent job interviewing people, and I just think, thank God I'm not out there anymore, having to see riders coming at you thinking, oh God, who's this asking a daft question? Because oftentimes, I mean, I think it's slightly better now. I'm sorry if I'm rambling and giving you too long answers, but certainly when I was there, you didn't have monitors by the finish line. So you'd be standing by the finish line, going in there into the bundle to interview someone just after they'd finished, with no real good idea of what had just happened. So you really had to feel your way in, ask a generic question, and then try and ask follow-ups from there, because you know you're probably the most ignorant person on the finish line, asking questions on behalf of the public.
Working with a team, you've got Ned, you've got Dave here. How does it work?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I learn something listening to the commentary every day. It's astonishing the way David can read a race and pick things out, and you're like, really? Are you sure? From that helicopter shot you can tell that? And then of course he's absolutely right, and they have a brilliant rapport. You know, Ned's becoming an excellent commentator. I can't think of a better. What else am I going to say about my colleagues? But you know, I can't think of a better pairing. So I mean, the team to me, you know, everyone's in the right place according to their strengths. So yeah, I think we've got a pretty good and settled team, except for the hole left by Chris Boardman.
Great, thank you very much, guys.
All right, thanks.